Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Joy at Home podcast. I am thrilled about the content that we're going to be bringing you today because I feel like it's a topic that is so relevant, so needed, and not talked about often enough. We're going to be talking about the People Pleaser's Guide to Co-Parenting Well. And if you've been hanging out with me very long, then you know that divorce is something that I and many of you as well have personally experienced. I'm the child of a divorced family. And when I think about this topic of co-parenting and people pleasing, it just hits really close to home. And I think back to my childhood and I think, gosh, I wish that this information and this kind of content would have been more available to my family. So wherever you fall, if you in the realm of all of this, if you're divorced yourself, if you have friends that are maybe walking through it, maybe you're the child of divorce like I am, I think this is just going to be great information to have in your back pocket. And I'm absolutely honored to announce to you today's guest, Mikki Gardner. She's a certified life and conscious parenting coach. She's the host of Co-Parenting with Confidence podcast, and she's a mom to her son. After learning how to navigate life post-divorce and using it as a catalyst to her own transformation, Mikki now helps moms move past the divorce drama to become calm, confident co-parents, even without their ex's participation. I think that's remarkable. Mikki's on a mission to help women navigate the emotional and practical difficulties of divorce and co-parenting while creating an intentional, joy, and ease-filled life after divorce. Wow. Welcome to the podcast, Mikki. It's great to have you.
Oh, Katie, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. That was a mouthful. So you did great getting all that in there.
Well, it's a lot. And I really do with my whole heart believe that this topic is so important. And so I literally am on the edge of my seat today. Just cannot wait to hear what you have to share about this because I know it's going to be gold. And I know that it's going to touch people's heart on some level because I feel like almost every listener out there can relate to divorce in some way. It's so prevalent in our world today. And I think that the women who are those single moms or who have been through divorce or who are walking through it maybe now, it's got to feel really scary and really heavy and probably really lonely. I remember sitting with my own mom on the kitchen floor post-divorce, and I was only 5 years old, but I could see in her eyes that she just felt lost. And so I really hope that today's episode can be a source of support and wisdom, especially for those women walking through that. Now, speaking of that, Mikki, I am really looking forward to actually hearing your personal story and how you kind of got into this niche. So would you tell us just a little bit more about yourself and your journey up to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think like everyone else, I never intended on getting divorced. No one in my family had been divorced. Maybe one or two on the other side of those, the ones that we weren't really close to. But in my immediate family, divorce just wasn't something that you do. And I really built an entire life to that I thought I had checked all of the boxes and that everything was going to be perfect. I got married, I had the education, I had my own business, I had a son, I had a house, I did all the things. And then in what felt like an instant, looking back, it wasn't, but that night in what felt like an instant, what I thought, everything I knew to be true about my marriage was gone in a moment. And in that moment, it was crushing and it sends you into a just spiral of not knowing what to do. I mean, when you just described your mom, it literally gave me chills because there were so many times that I found myself, we all end up on the bathroom floor. Your mom was in the kitchen, I hid in the bathroom trying to hide what was going on for me, from my son, from my family, from my friends. My now ex-husband and I tried to make things work for quite some time. I am a huge proponent of marriage. I really wanted it to work. Unfortunately for us, that wasn't in the cards. And one night, after about 6 or 7 months after the initial bomb went off in our marriage, I remember I was having a holiday party for my company at his restaurant. And we got into yet another fight, which went from 0 to 60 in just a second. And I was driving home that night and I pulled over on the side of the road and I was just in tears because I couldn't figure out how I had gotten there when I was trying to do everything right. And I heard a voice clear as day, what I believe is God's voice, whether it's universe, whatever. I knew that voice was truth. And it said, what you're, is this what you want your son to see of you? And I said, no, no. I don't want him to look at me and think that this is what it means to be a mom, a woman, a wife, any of those things. I was not showing up that way. And I woke up the next morning, made a pot of coffee, and told my husband, then husband, that we were going to get divorced. And I said, I have no idea what this is going to look like. I have no idea how we're going to do this, but I know that we're going to be a family. We just have to figure out how to be a family, and let's call it while we still have somewhat of warm feelings for one another. And let's figure out how to do this. And luckily for me, he was pretty on board. And we spent the next, year or two separating, divorcing. And I made so many mistakes. Looking back now, I tried to people please my way out of it. I tried to control everyone. I tried to act like I was okay when I wasn't. I had a lot of destructive behavior. I did all the things because I was so ashamed and so lonely and not having anyone to turn to. And I think back then, it was about 10 years ago, there wasn't quite as much as there is now. I feel like, it's all I talk about. So I think it's everywhere. But I do think that there are more resources now. And, how I got to where I am today is that I ended up, it's a long story, which I won't go into, but I met a life coach and I had never even heard of life coaching. And I thought, well, what's this? And I sort of went into that and I just followed my curiosity. And I realized that this is a way that I can give back and help moms who are in that position now, who feel alone and ashamed and don't know where to go. And so I am just so grateful that now I get to be a mentor and a coach to kind of go alongside of them on their journey as they figure out how to create their family now. Because I think you're still a family, whether you're in two houses or one house, you're still a family. And so how do we navigate that with calm, with clarity, with confidence, and with love? And it's completely possible. And we do not have to require the other person to be on board. We can do that. We moms are amazing. And so I really am grateful now to be able to sort of walk the journey and teach women the skills and hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that I made.
Wow, your journey and your transformation, it's like full circle. Your story is beautiful. And just to see the way how you walk through something really, really hard, and then now you're using it for so much good and to help other moms. You mentioned so many things there that I think are relatable. Every woman that I know has floods of big emotions and feelings, and almost every woman that I know likes to try to hide it. And like you mentioned, hiding in the bathroom, or whether you're, sitting on the kitchen floor and feeling like you don't have support and feeling like you have to or want to hide. It's kind of overwhelming. But I think that women need to know that they're not alone if they're experiencing that, which is exactly where you come in, offering that support to those women. And I can imagine by sharing your story that women are finding comfort and healing in that. I also love, Mikki, how you alluded to the importance of personal responsibility and how we can't change other people, because you spoke to sometimes the partner or the ex is on board and sometimes they're not. And it's still doable to be a good parent anyway. It's still possible to have at least some peace anyway. And so that brings hope. That brings hope. And so I love that you shared that. As we know, and as you alluded to, divorce can be very messy. My gosh, divorce can be so messy.
So messy.
Bless those who go through a divorce and it's not messy. And I do know a few people who very peacefully went through the process of that, and they are amazing co-parents. But my goodness gracious, I know so many more who walked through a really messy divorce. And so what would you say to the one who's going through a messy divorce? How would you encourage them to stay grounded amidst that chaos of the divorce and of
Mhm.
trying to co-parent?
Yeah, so this is the hardest part of it because divorce, there's different sections, but divorce in and of itself is a death of a dream. It's a death of a life that you thought you had. And when we lose someone we love, we give people a lot of grace and a lot of space and time to heal and to mourn. With divorce, there is this imposed sort of time limit, like, okay, it's been this long, let's get you back out there, let's get going. But it's not that easy because we're having so many feelings, we're having so many new things that we're having to get acclimated to. You're required to still be a parent while you're really emotionally traumatized. And the more difficult the marriage and the divorce was, sort of the harder it's going to be. But you're also expected to parent these little children during this time where you're really depleted. And so I think number one is always learning how to protect your own well-being. And that is really learning how to speak up with conviction and hold boundaries that protect your peace. The one thing that I really want all women to know is that you are the one who creates and maintains your peace, not other people. We don't need to change your acts, or we don't need them to change their behavior in order for you to feel differently. Yes, it would be awesome if they weren't such a jerk sometimes. I get that. But they are who they are, and we have to start to really look at it as, how am I creating peace versus just trying to be a peacekeeper? And we were talking before the interview started. I have a new book coming out that's all about people pleasing. And that's really what it is learning how to get out of that peacekeeper role. And that's where I spent a lot of time, just trying to control everyone's experience and all their feelings and everything that was going on, because it was really my inability to be uncomfortable and my unease that I wasn't willing to sit with. And so learning how to protect your own well-being is all about learning how to process your feelings, how to sort of regulate your thinking and your emotions so that you can show up in the way that you want. And really learning how to cultivate your own calmness. Again, same thing, you're in charge of this. And so learning how to do that and empower yourself is, to me, the number one thing that we need to learn.
So, Mikki, when it comes to your own life and you
Mhm.
embracing peace and staying grounded personally, what does that kind of look like for you?
So I feel like this is the cliche answer, but if there were a better one, it wouldn't be a cliche. I am a meditator. As of last month, in November of 2023, I have gone over 3 years of daily meditation. I believe whether you call it meditation, whether you call it prayer, whether you call it silence, it's really just prioritizing time of sitting down and returning to source, learning how to be quiet with yourself so that you can hear your intuition, you can hear the inner knowing, you can hear the divine voice inside of you. That practice of sitting in silence is what builds the muscle to be able to maintain calm in the chaos, right? If we can't, we have to actually build that muscle to be able to do it when everything is crazy around us. And so that has been, I think, for me, the biggest game changer in my life is learning how to sit in silence so that I can hear the answers that are inside of me, because you have all the answers for you inside of you. Excuse me. I have them for me. And so, even with my clients, I don't know their truth. I don't know their answer. My job is simply to teach them the tools so that they can find them for themselves. And when we can do that for ourselves as moms, we can then teach our children to do this. And when our children are able to create their own calm, their own balance, their own peace, this is when the world shifts. And this is what I believe we're in the process of doing right now, and reclaiming our freedom.
I love that answer. I feel like it's so simple, but not always easy. It is
Oh, it's
not,
the hardest thing.
It is not easy
So
to
hard.
sit in silence, and our brain runs, and our
Yes.
eyes run, and our heart is running, and our to-do list is going, and, on and on and on and on, especially as women. But I think you're right. I think it's the key to
Yeah.
peace. Prayer.
It-
I enjoy meditating too. And I do. I think
Mhm.
it's very helpful.
The amount of times I sit down and I was just laughing, I think this morning I was thinking about hot dogs and like sex and all these things. I'm like, what is going on up there? Like it is anarchy in my brain at 5:30, like complete anarchy. And so, but that's my job, is to sit there and just notice, okay, I actually don't eat hot dogs, but this is what's happening right now. So, I try to make, because a lot of people in my clients, I think like most people really resist it. They're like, Mikki, I've tried, I can't meditate. And really, all it is the willingness to sit down. And I think the most profound lesson I've learned from it is the biggest game changer for building self-trust. Because when you say you're going to do something and then you do it at the time you said you were going to do it, and you do it consistently, it's like putting a coin into a savings account that all of a sudden starts to build up, and you see the evidence, you see what it's doing. And to me, that's what really creates self-trust. And to me, that's really, especially when you look at, divorces don't happen because of happy reasons, and especially when there's betrayal, infidelity, or anything like that, we focus a lot of our attention on the other person, what the other person did or didn't do. But really, the most devastating thing that I've seen is the lack of self-trust that you have. Because when everything gets pulled out from under you, like I experienced, yes, I was angry. Yes, I didn't trust him. But the person I really didn't trust was me. Because
Hmm.
what did I miss? What didn't I see? And then you extrapolate, well, how could I be a good mom? What am I missing there? What am I not seeing? What are my blind spots? And you start to go into this spiral. And so really, one of the first things that we need to do, again, in learning how to protect our well-being and cultivate calmness, is learning how to trust ourselves. And so I think that meditation and prayer, whatever, just sitting down in silence for 10 minutes is an act of true liberation, and really learning to build self-trust with yourself again. Because I know in divorce, it's one of the things that goes first.
I think that's a great place to start. And I think it's a great thing to have really good self-control around, and then to model to and teach our kids.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. They really learn by watching what we're doing. And so if they
Yep.
see us having self-control, and they see us taking moments to be quiet and calm, it's very possible that our kids will adopt that and model that in their own life as well. I'll link in the show notes, but there are a couple episodes here on the Joy at Home podcast where I talked about meditating. And actually I led the listeners through a guided meditation where we went through
Good.
some Bible verses. So I'll link those in the show notes so you can go back
Awesome.
and check those episodes out. But I think that's very helpful. I want to back up just a little bit and go back to that word of people pleasing, Mikki. I would love for you
Mhm.
just to deep dive deep dive on, like, how would you define that? What is a people pleaser? How can I know if I'm a people pleaser or not? And then knowing that is helpful in seeing and saying, maybe I need to implement some more of this piece into my life.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a few things, I have like a little assessment in the book, but I'll just name a couple here of ways that we might know if we're a people pleaser. Are you quick to agree with someone to avoid conflict? Do you feel overly responsible for how other people feel? Other people feel, sorry. Do you apologize often? I'm the worst offender of this one. Um, do you do things that you don't want to do so that other people won't be disappointed? Do you accept fault even when you're not to blame? Are you uncomfortable with other people being upset with you? Do you push your needs aside? Do you give hoping that someone is going to give you the same in return, right? Hoping for reciprocation of those feelings. And do you feel frustrated or resentful often? Passive aggressiveness, right? These are all signs of people pleasing, because essentially what people pleasing is is it's lying pretty much, because we can't handle the discomfort and unease that we feel inside of ourselves. So we try to change everything around us.
That's good. That resonates. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the good news. We people pleasers are awesome. We're awesome people, right? Like, I'm not a downer on people pleasing. We are efficient. We get things done. Everybody loves us. We're super accommodating. We're really, really helpful. We're great. People pleasing has a shadow side when it comes at the expense of you and at the expense of your peace. When you're not being honest and sort of saying, no, 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 it's fine. It's fine. I don't need anything. But you actually do need something, right? When you don't allow your needs and your desires and your truth to matter, this is when people pleasing can be a detriment. And so we really want to learn how to stop just trying to keep the peace for everyone else's sake and learn how to start creating peace. And when we create peace from inside of ourselves, that is the strongest energy in the room. Many people think the one who's yelling or throwing things or super, like all over the place, we think that they're the biggest energy in the room. They're the weakest energy, right? If you look at sound waves, we know this to be true, that anything high pitched or, yelling or anything like that, it's at a very high part of the scale because it's very unstable. When we are peaceful and calm and grounded, it's a very low, steady energy. That's the strongest energy in our universe. And so that is the peace that we're trying to create, is a groundedness, a knowing, and a calmness. Because when we are that, we affect everything around us. And so that's really the energy that I want to teach people, how to start coming from that versus just being reactive to the world.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Peace and calm. From a different perspective, again, as a child of divorce, I really see how my parents' divorce shaped me into becoming a hardcore people pleaser. Because you've got this side and this side. And so just something to think about with your kids. I think it's really important, again, to exercise that self-control and to have good awareness around, if you are a people pleaser, working to get a handle on that so that you don't pass that down or do things or say things to maybe even unintentionally pass that down. And again, I think Mikki hit the nail on the head with just that peace and that calm and that grounding and boundaries. So let's talk just for a minute about boundaries and how to honor and uphold your boundaries with your ex, with the other co-parent in the situation.
Yeah. So before we jump to that, I think there's a sort of a 3-step framework that I work under, and it applies to the boundaries. But everything begins with awareness, right? And it's like you just said, we have to start with the awareness because we can't change anything that we aren't aware of. So we have to start with understanding, okay, what's really going on, right? And a lot of the world right now, I think what we're seeing is most people are living in a reactive state, meaning it's like, I call it like living in a pinball machine. You're just reacting to whatever's coming at you, all the bright lights and the paddles and all the things. And especially when you have high conflict or any conflict or even just sadness and wrapped up with your ex, we become very reactive. It's like, I hear all the times, well, I have to do something. I have to say something. I can't let them win. Right. And that's a first signal that you're in a reactive state. The opposite of that, or getting triggered, right? The opposite of getting triggered or being reactive is to take responsibility. And I define responsibility as the ability to respond to life. And that's what comes from that grounded state. So it really takes the awareness. Okay, I'm triggered. Even if you just, yelled and unloaded all your stuff, if you just realize it, okay, you just won. Like, first step, you're aware. So then we can move to the second step, with is agency. Agency is simply a fancy word for choices. And so we only ever have 3. The world made it really easy. We can accept something, we can change it, or we can leave it. And then from that, once we have awareness and we understand what our choices are, well, then we start to take aligned action in the direction that we want to go. So I wanted to bring this up because when we think about boundaries, people often think, oh, well, I have to set a boundary to stop the other person from intruding on my space. We can't change other people and we can't stop them from doing whatever, God gave us free will. Unfortunately, it applies to our ex as well. So, and our children. Oh, that's a hard one. So, we have to look at boundaries for what they are, which is almost like a property line. It's what you will do in response to something that happens. So when we start to understand boundaries from that angle, it's really how am I going to respond or to what's happening? And that is taking aligned action towards what it is that you want. And so a boundary could look like, if you call after 10 o'clock, I won't pick up the phone. A lot of times people will pick up the phone and then they get annoyed and then they yell at the person for calling, right? Or they get into the nastygram exchange where it's just this spiral of nasty text happening. The boundary is really to look at it. How do I want to be showing up? And am I in alignment with that? So as soon as you realize that you have sort of been triggered or activated, it's your first opportunity to pull back. And so you can start to set from that place, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And how do I need to act to get myself there? And oftentimes boundaries are in that. But I think the most important thing to say about boundaries is they need to be clear. They need to be about you, what you will or will not do, not the other person. They need to be communicated either to yourself or the other person. And then the most important part is expect pushback. People don't like boundaries. Children do not like boundaries. And they really don't like it from people pleasers because we've always accommodated everyone's needs. So then when you stop, people are like, what? No, go back to the way that you've been. So we have to expect the pushback and at the same time, take care of our own peace to say, no, this actually matters. I'm allowed to have this boundary. So you expect the pushback, you hold the boundary while you take care of yourself. And then you know what? You expect more pushback because they really don't like it, right? But you still hold the boundary. And so, boundaries is sort of, I know, a big topic right now, but it's also comes when we are able to be in a more grounded state. That's when we're able to set effective boundaries. Most of the time, there's like the TikTok boundaries, which is you can't talk to me like this, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. No, they actually can. It's not great, but a boundary is truly about you and what you will or will not do, will or will not accept.
For sure. Oh my gosh, you just dropped so many wisdom bombs right there. And what you shared, I just want to rewind that little section and listen to it over and over again because it applies to so many relationships in our life. If you're married, it applies with your spouse. If you're divorced, it applies to your ex. If you have kids, which most likely you do if you're listening to this podcast, then it applies with your kids. And you just really brought fresh perspective on how to handle that effectively, efficiently, and with so much grace. That was gold. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Thank you for sharing. That was awesome. So what do you do if you're in a situation where your ex is maybe not participating in co-parenting, maybe isn't on board the way that you are or the way that you're hoping that they will be? What in the world do you do in that type of situation?
So many of my clients just sort of flooded into my brain all at once. I think this is one of the hardest things, right? Because the last thing you want is your children affected by your divorce. And inevitably they are. My son just started seeing a new therapist, which, my gosh, I don't know if any of you are trying to find your children therapist right now. It is the hardest thing to do. Good ones. They've got wait lists forever. But we were sitting there and I was thinking to myself, looking at him, we're 10 years out and I'm all about mental health and resources. So, he knows this is a non-negotiable. He doesn't try to fight me anymore. But, we try so hard not to let our choices in our relationship, mistakes or failures or whatever you want to call them, impact the kid, but they do. And it's really about how do we start to move forward in a way that is empowering us. And what does this have to do with your question? You're probably thinking. We cannot control what your ex is or isn't doing. What you can do is take personal ownership over how you're showing up. There's a lot of times that I think, especially as people pleasers, or we are so uncomfortable, right? We don't want our children to feel the pain of the other parent not being involved, or, feeling deserted, or, whatever. And so we'll start to like tell our kids like, oh, he really wants to be here, but he's really busy at work, and like all of these excuses, and which is, I'm not saying is wrong, but first and foremost, I think the best thing we can do is sit back and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and owning our feelings about the situation and getting help to process that. Because we can't change what the other parent is or isn't doing. All we have control over is how we show up, right? And so really asking yourself, how am I contributing or hurting this situation, right? Am I making it hard for the other co-parent to show up? Or am I making it easier, right? Am I sugarcoating what's going on or not being honest? Or am I just bad mouthing and sort of laying it all on the line for my kid, right? Our kids don't need all of our baggage to carry. They'll have enough of that of their own. I think it's really just learning again to protect your own peace and learning how to have that calmness and that clarity so that you can show up as the most stable, loving version of you, because that is all your children need. They don't need you to be perfect. They don't need you to rescue them. All they need to do is watch you rescue yourself. And then when you do that, you teach them the skills to do it. And so a lot of times with my clients, they'll get frustrated because they're like, you're not telling me how to change my ex. I'm not, because they're not here. So we can't do anything about that. But what we can do is make sure that you're showing up in the best way possible, reclaiming your well-being, your wholeness, and your freedom so that you can have joy and feel safe and loving within your family. And so I don't know that that answered the question, but I always say we have to start with ourselves and how are we showing up? Because I believe every mom has the ability and the power to create a harmonious environment for her children, regardless of what the ex is doing. And that's your only job.
So good. I feel like what you shared just brought freedom and peace to many listeners. As you were sharing all that, I was sitting here thinking like, man, to be in that situation and to try to take on the weight of the other parent feels so heavy. To try to cover for them or, lie for them, or even to talk bad about them, it feels like it seriously feels like a physical weight on my shoulders. I've not been in that situation. Yeah, I've not been in that exact situation, but I saw it with my parents, and I saw it as a weight on their shoulders. And something I want to say to the moms is that I promise you, if you will take Mikki's advice and wisdom to heart, I promise you, as your kids grow up, they will see through all the fluff. They will see through you trying to cover. They will see through the bad mouthing. And what they will see is a really clear picture of who you are as an individual, as a mom, as a parent, how you were taking care of yourself and how you showed up for them. I promise you they will see the truth about that. And so I just say, here's your permission to release that heaviness. Just be true to who you are, to love your kids well, to show up, to hold your tongue. If there's bad thoughts or comments, that serves no purpose. To hold your tongue. If you're trying to cover for them, just show up as the true best version of you for your kids. And that's what your kids are going to remember. And that's what they're going to see. And that's who your kids need. So I have goosebumps because I feel like what you shared just brought freedom, and it was just a release of this heavy weight, the permission to not have to carry that, of the co-parent. And so, Mikki, I think what you shared was spot on. I think you absolutely beautifully answered that question. I feel like that was so good. Let's talk about.
And I want to say, Can I say one other
Oh,
thing? I
yeah.
think that brings us to, the F word, which is forgiveness.
Oh, so
And
big.
this is something we all have to learn in life, but definitely in divorce, because, you know, forgiveness isn't for the other person. I'm sure you talk about this, right? It's just a choice to not carry someone else's weight, not to carry someone else's baggage and let that hold you down. And so that's one of the processes, is to learn how to forgive so that you're simply not weighted down by it all. And one of the one of the ways that I think we really, and this is a different conversation maybe for another day, but learning how to release our anger is so important,
Hmm.
because anger is always under the surface, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you're, not doing what you should do. Sometimes things happen and we have anger about it, and learning how to release that in a healthy way, because a lot of us don't like conflict because we've seen conflict acted out in really unhealthy ways: screaming, yelling, hitting, fighting, throwing things, right? These are big scary things. The anger isn't scary. The way people exhibit and manifest anger is what's scary. And so when we're able to learn how to process all of these feelings and get them out in a healthy way, that is what creates the most liberation. And then to be able to teach your children how to do that for themselves is such a beautiful practice too. So I think, forgiveness and learning how to process all of those feelings that we really don't know what to do with, and we haven't as women been taught, we're just not supposed to be angry. But
Mm.
that doesn't, we're human. We are. So I think all of these things sort of really haven't taught us how to do it. And so that's why we need people helping us. And I'm so grateful that your listeners are listening to you and getting all of this great information to be able to start really showing up the way that they want to in life.
That's so good. We do have several episodes on forgiveness. I'll link to
Good.
those in the show notes. And I totally agree with you, Mikki. Forgiveness is for you. It frees your own heart. And I also
Mhm.
want to add that
Yeah.
when you forgive someone, it does not validate what they did to you. It doesn't
No.
mean that you're saying it's okay what you did to me. You're releasing your heart is what you're doing with
Yeah.
forgiveness. And it's a good
Yeah.
thing. It's a
I
good
had
thing.
to learn how to forgive my ex, and love him. And I do. I'll tell him, and I'm not telling you that you have to tell your ex that you love them, but it's possible, right? And I've learned to love him as the father of my child and for the life that we have. Um, I've learned how to love his wife, right? That was a whole journey unto itself,
That's big.
but
That's
I can
huge.
genuinely say, yeah, I've learned to love her, because I believe that anyone who's in your children's life, we get to either look at them as the enemy or one more person to love your child. And so I choose to look at her that way. And that requires me to love her. And so I've had to learn how to do that too.
Oh my gosh, goosebumps. That was a wisdom bomb right there. I'm like, where was this information 30 years ago?
I
So
know.
good.
Where was it 10 years ago? I mean, I made the
Oh,
mistakes, trust me.
oh my gosh. Oh, this is gonna bless so many today. Oh my goodness. Anger. I wanted to hit on that again and just let you all know that we do have a really great episode on anger. I brought my little sister on the show. She has 4 girls ages 5 and under. Bless her heart. And she was dealing with a lot of anger. And she came on the
Mhm.
show as she had processed that and worked through that. And she shared a ton of wisdom about that. So I'll link to that
Yeah,
episode in the
good,
show
good,
notes
good.
as well. And I'm glad that you brought that up, Mikki, because I think it's another thing that a lot of women deal with, that it's like hush, hush,
Mhm.
like we don't want to talk
Hush,
about
hush, don't.
that. Don't let anybody know.
Nobody likes an angry woman, right? Nobody wants to be that, but we're
Right.
angry. We have a lot to
Right.
be angry about.
Right. And so I think it's really important to bring awareness to that and to work through that.
Yeah.
Kind of along that same avenue, let's talk about getting professional help. Mikki, when do you feel like it might be time, and how would we know that we need to go seek out some professional help?
If you're asking the question, it's time, right? Because if you're asking that question, you already know that it's time. And I am a huge believer of, there is so much help out there, right? Whether it's through church support groups, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a coach like myself, whether it's podcasts, listening to podcasts. I would just encourage you to follow your curiosity. If something feels intriguing, if it feels curious to you, follow it. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it, right? But trust that inner guidance system. We all have that inner GPS, that intuition, and learning how to trust it and learn to move forward towards things. We have grown up, and all of us, in this culture of, don't talk about things, don't talk about your feelings, don't air your dirty laundry. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Thanks, mom. I love my mom dearly, but I'm like, that one, not helpful. But she grew up with it. We are now in this place that we're learning, and we're seeing that it just doesn't work, right? To not talk about things. And frankly, we're not meant to be these lone wolves like we are. We're not meant to live in our little houses all alone. We are meant and wired to be in community. And so we need people around us. And I would say that if you're going through divorce, if you're struggling with co-parenting, and I define co-parenting as parenting with anyone you don't agree with 100% of the time. So it's all of us, right? Married, divorced, whatever. Co-parenting is hard when you have other people involved in it. And so I would really encourage you to find someone that you trust, who's their rear view mirror is your today, right? Like they know where you've been, and they can come alongside you and walk with you on the journey. Again, I don't have the answers for my clients. They have the answers. My job is to walk alongside them and to help them and hold their hand and move them forward, because we need that support. We're wired for that. And we need to be in community with one another. And I think the most courageous thing you can do is get help and allow your children to watch you. Because I didn't for a very long time, and I hid my anxiety. I thought I hid my anxiety. I wasn't, right? My depression and my anxiety were out of control after the divorce. And I've struggled with depression since I was a teenager. And so I really had to learn how to get the tools to move through that. And I speak more honestly now. And like you said, your children are watching you. They don't learn by what you say, they learn by what they see. And so really showing them that the most courageous thing to do is to be honest about where you are and get help, so that you can become a stronger version and then help others. I mean, I think that's really all we're looking to do here on this planet. And so the more we can do that and take the shame away from it, or less isolation from ourselves, and get into community, the better. And I just really hope that anyone who's listening, who's thinking like, maybe I could use some help, reach out, just have the conversation. And if it feels aligned for you, you will know.
That's so good. That's so good. I'm glad that you're bringing awareness to that. And I'm grateful that there seems to be less of a stigma around getting help and support today than there used to be. I think therapists are a good thing. So whether you're seeking out a mentor, someone who's walked in your shoes before, a therapist, a life coach, someone that can offer that support and accountability and outside perspective, someone like Mikki, someone who can sit on the outside and let you talk about those things. And they can say, okay, I see this and this. How do you feel about that? Or what does that bring up for you? And really it allows you the space and the safe place to come up with your own answers. They're inside of you, but sometimes we need a little bit of help in finding those answers. And again, just a little nugget of outside perspective. Your children are not therapists, nor should they ever be. So I
thank you for saying that, Katie.
Yeah. If you're struggling at all, I really want to encourage you to reach out for support, and don't put it on your kids' shoulders. Find that therapist, find a life coach, find someone like Mikki, or reach out to Mikki and let them help you. There are people out there willing and ready to help you. And there's absolutely no shame in reaching out for help. So if you need the permission to reach out for professional help today, then this is it. This is your sign. Okay.
No,
Mikki.
I had sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly, one of my new clients, she came in and she's like so many, but she said, she's really struggling to watch her children sort of move on with, her ex moved on very quickly, has a new wife, they're traveling, they're doing all these things, they're having these big holidays. She's really struggling because she's feeling like she's cast out of her own family, which is definitely a feeling I understand. And she said, if my kids could just know the truth, they wouldn't feel the same way. And I said, but why do you want them to have less of a good experience? Why not let them be loved and enjoy new experiences, right? And it was because she couldn't, right? She was feeling so cast aside. And so she wanted her kids to know the truth, but that's not their responsibility. Your healing isn't their responsibility. And they're knowing, quote unquote, that your truth isn't their weight to carry. And so I think what you just said is so important. We can't let our kids bear the brunt, right? Or the weight of what's going on for us. We really have to do that healing work for ourselves, but we do that in community with others. And so it's so important to get that help.
That's good stuff. That gave me goosebumps again. I'm really glad that you shared that. And just that perspective of let your kids, it's already hard enough for your kids. Let them experience,
It's so hard.
let them experience the good parts of it.
Yep.
Understand that there are more people to love them. And not that it has to always be sunshine and rainbows, but look for the good. Again, from the different perspective, my parents' divorce affected me for so long, even into my own marriage.
Yeah.
And I was just like focusing on the horrible parts of it. And finally I realized, you know what? My family divided, but then it multiplied. And I have all these bonus siblings and bonus family members. There was honestly a lot of good that came out of it. And so to kind of look, I know it's tough. I'm not taking away from anything that anybody's walking through or the pain or the hurt. And it can be hard to find those good things, but I promise you that there are some good things, and give your kids the space, love them, and care about them enough to let them experience some of the good parts that came out of this maybe tough situation.
Yeah.
I think that's good. That's so good. So, Mikki, as we come to a close today, I want to give you just a second to share about your new book. This is so exciting. I'm so excited for you. The People Pleaser's Guide to Co-Parenting Well. Can you tell us just briefly about the book and where we can get a copy of it?
Yeah, so I'll give you the link so that you can get it, but it's everywhere books are sold. But the People Pleaser's Guide to Co-Parenting Well is really about how to stop being, again, the peacekeeper and start parenting peacefully, even when your ex doesn't reciprocate. Because it's learning how to stop living on autopilot and really start navigating where you want to go, right? That internal GPS that we were talking about. And it's learning how to, when you get triggered, learning how to take responsibility, right? Learning how to have your own back consistently, building that self-trust so that you can be the calm, confident co-parent that you want to be, right? Regardless of what's going on. And it's totally possible. And so I really wanted to take some of the beautiful stories of my clients who inspire me every day, of these women that have walked through really difficult situations and learned how to empower themselves and shift the trajectory of their family, right? It only takes one, right? And the ripple effect that you will have when you start parenting in a more peaceful way, again, creating your own internal peace, the ripple effect from that, you can't even measure. And so I really know that the easiest way, we all want our kids to be okay. The best way for your kids to be okay is for you to be okay. And so you start to really do the work now and stop trying to just keep the peace, but really start to cultivate your own. This is where all the juice begins. And this is where I believe we shift again the world, because we need a shift and it's coming. And I think it's really from this calm, confident space.
That sounds like such an encouraging read. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of that and read through that. It sounds like it's going to bring so much encouragement and support. I'm always telling my kids, be who you want to be. Let me just say that again. Be who you want to be. And Mikki is literally giving you the roadmap on how to be who you want to be. So make sure to grab a copy of that book. And Mikki, where else can listeners find you or connect with you or follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on I have a podcast, Co-Parenting with Confidence. And then I'm on Instagram a lot. So I hang out there. But definitely check out the book. It's on my website and anywhere books are sold. But I just really want you to know, I think the one message that I want moms to know is that I know you feel alone. I know that you feel alone and you're not. All you have to do is reach out your hand and there is going to be someone there. And reach out to me. If I'm not your person, I will find you your person, right? Because there is so much help out there. And it starts with us being willing to let ourselves matter, let our feelings matter, let our experiences matter, and to choose differently. You know, my favorite quote is Gandhi's, be the change you want to see in the world. And that is our only job here on this earth. And divorce can make it feel really challenging. And it also can be a gift that you can learn how to be the woman and the mom that you really want to be.
So good. Mikki, I appreciate you so much and the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining us today on the show.
Oh, thank you, Katie. I really admire all of your work. I love listening to your podcast, and I'm grateful for all you're doing in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for tuning in today. What an encouraging conversation. This is going to be one that I am going to go back and hit play on over and over again. And I'm going to share it with my friends and share it with the world because it's a message of hope and it's a message of healing and peace and freedom and something that truly needs to be shared. So I hope you go check out Mikki and go grab a copy of her new book, share this episode with a friend. And for now, we'll be signing off with Joy. We'll see you next time.